Somewhere in Madagascar right now, before sunrise, a farmer is walking a row of vines with a toothpick in one hand. Not a machine, not an insect, a toothpick. In the next few hours, they'll touch thousands of orchid flowers, one at a time, because if they miss the window, that flower is gone forever. And so is the bean it would have made. This ritual happens every single morning during flowering season, on every vanilla farm on Earth, and almost nobody doing it knows the name of the person who invented it. He was 12 years old, he was enslaved, and in 1997 he solved a puzzle that had beaten the best-funded scientists in Europe for 3 centuries. That's where this story ends up. It starts somewhere much older and much stranger, with the only orchid on the planet that bothers to grow fruit. Picture the Gulf Coast of Mexico, the region we now call Veracruz, thick with tropical forest. Climbing the trunks of the trees is a vine that can stretch 30 meters into the canopy, with flowers that open once and then disappear. That plant is Vanilla planifolia, and out of the roughly 28,000 orchid species alive today, it is the only one that produces something you can eat. The Totonac people of that coast were cultivating it as far back as the 1200s, and to them, it wasn't a crop. It was sacred. They burned it as offering, wore it as perfume, used it in medicine, and told a story to explain where it came from. A princess named Tsakopontsiza, forbidden from loving a mortal man who chose to become the vine herself rather than lose him. Every flowering season, they said, was her. For a couple of centuries, that was the whole story, a local, quiet relationship between one culture and one plant. Then, in 1427, the Aztec Empire swallowed Totonac territory, and everything changed. The Aztecs took one taste of this black pod, as they called it, and folded it into something new. A drink made of ground cacao, corn, chili, and vanilla, thick and bitter, and completely unlike the hot chocolate we know now. This drink was reserved entirely for royalty, priests, and elite warriors. From its very first appearance outside Totonac land, vanilla was already a luxury good, and the Totonacs were now forced to farm it as tribute, an annual tax paid in orchid pods to an empire that had conquered them. Emperor Moctezuma reportedly drank the stuff by the dozens of cups a day, out of golden cups, which is exactly the scene Hernán Cortés walked into in Tisacha, Pitzot, Diviatnatsat. The Spanish conquistador was greeted with ceremony, possibly mistaken for a returning god, and handed a cup of that same dark, spiced chocolate drink. He'd never tasted anything like it. When he sailed home, cacao came with him, and so did this strange, sheath-shaped pod the Spanish would name vanilla, little pod. Within a few decades, it had reached the royal courts of Europe, and Europe did not handle it calmly. Elizabeth I liked it enough to demand it in her desserts on its own, without chocolate. Arguably the first European on record to treat vanilla as a flavor in its own right, rather than a chocolate sidekick. French apothecaries prescribed it for everything from headaches to more private complaints. A single bean could cost a laborer a week's wages, and later, an ocean and 2 centuries away, Thomas Jefferson came home from Paris so obsessed that he ordered 50 vanilla pods shipped to Virginia and wrote out one of the first American ice cream recipes, a dessert he'd go on to serve at the White House. So by the 1700s, the whole Western world wanted vanilla. And here's the problem. Nobody outside Mexico could grow it. European colonial powers tried everything. They shipped cuttings to botanical gardens in Paris and London, planted vines across the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, anywhere with the right heat and humidity. The vines grew fine. They leafed out. They flowered right on schedule. And then, every single time, nothing. No pods, not one. Decades of colonial agricultural effort, and the plant simply refused to fruit outside its homeland. The answer wasn't in the soil, or the rainfall, or the altitude. It was a bee. Specifically, one tiny stingless species native only to Mexico and Central America, small enough to squeeze past a membrane inside the vanilla flower called the rostellum, a natural wall that keeps the flower's male and female parts from ever touching on their own. That bee was the only creature on Earth that could get past it, and each flower only stays open for a matter of hours before it wilts for good. So the entire global vanilla supply, for roughly 300 years, hinged on whether one specific insect happened to visit one specific flower during one specific morning in one specific country. Nowhere else had the bee. Nowhere else had vanilla.
In 1836, a Belgian botanist named Charles Morin worked out a method to pollinate the flower by hand, proof it was theoretically possible. But his technique was slow and delicate, something you could pull off in a controlled greenhouse, not something a plantation could use at scale. The problem was solved on paper and unsolved everywhere else. Then, in 1841, on a volcanic island in the Indian Ocean that the French called Bourbon, today's Réunion, a 12-year-old boy changed that. His name was Edmond. Enslaved from birth, he'd lost his mother in childbirth and never knew his father. He belonged to a plantation owner named Feriol Bellier Beaumont, who had taken an interest in the boy and taught him the basics of botany, including how to hand-pollinate crops like watermelon and pumpkin. One day in the garden, Bellier Beaumont noticed something impossible. 2 green pods hanging from a vanilla vine that had sat barren for 20 years. He asked what had happened. Edmond told him he'd done it himself. Nobody believed a child had cracked a mystery that had defeated Europe's finest botanists for 3 centuries. Until more pods appeared, and Edmond was asked to show exactly how. What he demonstrated took seconds. He'd lift the rostellum with a thin sliver of wood, hold the flower steady with one hand, and press the pollen against the stigma with his thumb. No tools, no lab, no theory. Just a stick, a thumb, and total precision, repeated flower after flower after flower. The technique spread across Réunion within months and reached Madagascar within years, and it has never needed improving. To this day, there is no machine that pollinates a vanilla orchid. Every bean that exists, from every farm on the planet, still passes through a human hand, using essentially Edmond's exact method. Edmond himself got none of it. A French botanist later tried to claim credit for the same technique, a claim historians have since dismissed outright. The timeline simply doesn't work. Slavery was abolished on Réunion in 1847, and Edmond was freed and given the surname Albius. But freedom didn't bring him security. He was later convicted of a minor theft, and though his old owner intervened to get his sentence reduced, Edmond spent the rest of his life poor. He died in a public hospital in 1878 at 51. A local newspaper wrote the only epitaph he got: the man who, at great profit to the colony, discovered how to pollinate vanilla had died destitute. His technique, meanwhile, kept traveling. It reached Madagascar's northeastern coast, the Sava region, which turned out to have exactly the heat, humidity, and rainfall the vine needed. Today, that single stretch of coastline produces roughly 80% of the world's vanilla, grown by around 70,000 smallholder farmers, most working plots smaller than a hectare, using, every morning, the same 3-second motion a 12-year-old invented almost 200 years ago. But vanilla's story splits in two after that. Because while Madagascar was becoming the center of the natural bean trade, chemists in Germany were working on a shortcut. In Ferdinand Tiemann and Wilhelm Hamann figured out how to synthesize vanillin, the single molecule most responsible for vanilla's flavor, out of pine bark compounds. It was one of the first synthetic aroma chemicals ever made commercially. A real vanilla bean actually contains over 250 different flavor compounds working together. Synthetic vanillin replicates just the one your brain locks onto as vanilla. It's not the full picture, but for ice cream, cookies, candles, it's close enough that most people genuinely cannot tell the difference in a blind taste test. Today, over 85% of all vanilla flavoring used worldwide is synthetic, meaning the natural bean, the one Edmond's technique made possible, now supplies less than 2% of global demand by weight, but still commands nearly all of the prestige. And the price of that real bean is genuinely unhinged. It's the second most expensive spice on earth after saffron, and it swings wildly, from around $20 a kilogram in the early 2000s to over $500 a kilogram after a cyclone wiped out Madagascar's harvest in 2000, a price that briefly put vanilla in the same league as silver by weight. That kind of volatility has real consequences. When prices spike, vanilla becomes a target for theft,
and some farmers now sleep in their fields to guard vines or harvest pods early before they fully matured, just to keep them from being stolen, even though early harvesting means weaker flavor and lower quality beans.
And even after the pod is picked, the work is nowhere near finished. Green vanilla has almost no smell at all. It has to be killed in hot water, wrapped in cloth to sweat, and then laid out in the sun by day and packed away every night for weeks. A slow, hands-on process closer to winemaking than farming that breaks the pod's chemistry down into the 250 plus compounds that finally make it smell like vanilla. From flower to finished bean, the whole process takes over a year. It takes roughly 7 kilograms of green pods to make 1 kilogram of the cured product you'd find on a shelf. So the next time someone calls something vanilla to mean plain or boring or basic, think about what that word is actually carrying. An orchid that only fruits once it's been touched, by hand, within a few hours of blooming, once a year. A flavour an empire taxed out of a conquered people that European royalty fought to own, that stumped professional science for 300 years, until it met a 12-year-old with no formal education and a sliver of wood. A technique that has never been replaced, performed today by tens of thousands of farmers who've likely never heard his name.
Edmond Albius unlocked a global industry with his own 2 hands and died with nothing to show for it. Every time you taste real vanilla, that's the hand you're tasting.